Welcome to today's conversation. We will be talking about an area sometimes I don't think that gets the, attention it needs in hospitality. And that's actually what I talked with Hamish about today. And Hamish, he is from ISS and he works with food in ISS. And it's incredible what's actually going on in the catering industry. But sometimes in hospitality, we forget a bit about that industry behind the lines of workplace catering. And we want to talk about the transformation that's actually happening in workplace catering after we came out of the pandemic, because a lot is happening, I can tell you. And also, their focus on sustainability and what they're doing actually to make the world a better place, both for people and the planet. So welcome to the show, Hamish. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to see you and looking forward to it.
So Hamish, we've been talking a bit, and you are originally come from Australia. Your journey in hospitality started in Australia, and actually you started in McDonald's. You told me that, so I think that's quite cool. That's where we almost both started our journey. And then, can you share a bit about your journey and why you're choosing career in food service and how it went from McDonald's to a global catering role?
Yeah, I think, Michael, like many sort of young people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left school. And so I sort of fell into hospitality because I had a family background of not in hospitality, but people who love to, run dinner parties and, really, entertain sort of guests on the weekends and at night. So that gave me a passion for food. My mother was a great, home cook and, would do events for up to sort of 20, 30 people at times. So that sort of tweaked my interest. And, then I did a little bit of time, as you said, as a crew member at McDonald's. And I also worked at a similar sort of time as in a French bakehouse and learned the trade of baking goods. And that really sort of got me excited about the business of hospitality. So I thought I really needed to go off and, get some form of a qualification on the back of that. So I went, like many, and did a hotel management and catering qualification in Melbourne. And that sort of set me on the journey. So after that, I did a couple of years in 4- and 5-star hotels, both in Australia and then also overseas. And when I returned to Melbourne, after sort of a bit of a working holiday and travel and that, I got a job with an organisation called the Spotless Group as a restaurant supervisor. And Spotless at that time was Australia's largest contract catering business and covered workplace catering, but also major events and major stadia, and was a fairly diverse business. And more than just food, they did a range of facility activities. So, I joined them and I was really lucky because they were a growing organisation. And so over the next 20 years, my career sort of mirrored the growth of the organisation. So it went from a relatively small, Australian-focused organisation right up to be a global player in facility services. And so I benefited from that and had lots of great mentors and leaders in the business that sort of helped me sort of get great experience in operations and business development. And, was given a lot of freedom to sort of expand my career and learn throughout that process. So in 2010, I was asked to head up their newly formed international facilities business out of London as the CEO. And so that brought me to this side of the world. And, I say to a lot of people, what an experience. I didn't think that, when I was working, at a McDonald's sort of site in Queensland at the time, I would ever be sort of working on a global scale covering, UK, Europe, Middle East and North America, and that was really interesting. So since then, I've had time running my own international consultancy business and worked in the airline industry, sourcing food and handling logistics for food right across the globe as well. And that brought me to sort of the pandemic and, an opportunity to join ISS, which I did in 2020. And, I was attracted to ISS because of the global nature of the business, and I was also attracted to ISS because not many people knew that food was such a big sort of service line for ISS. And we've got lots of fantastic sort of, best-in-class sort of examples of food service in workplaces and other environments across the world. And the rest is history. So here I am sort of 3 years on from that decision, which has been great.
Yeah, and it is very interesting thinking about, I think you're telling about your journey is like, is there any like, your skills for like people looking at and potentially a career in hospitality or no, it's really, really challenging right now. But like, is there some skills you've been taking out of that journey you think you would never ever have had that opportunity if you've gone somewhere else to focusing on your career?
I think the beauty of the business to business, food service, contract catering business is that, as a leader in that business, whether you're leading a site, whether you're leading a region, a state, a country, you get to touch all aspects of business. So you are managing people, you're managing complex client relationships and stakeholder management within organisations. You're dealing with people in organisations from sort of our customers who may be sort of frontline workers, right up to C-suite sort of decision makers in those organisations. You get to have experience in managing a P&L, which is really valuable, and all of the challenges and benefits of managing a team of people. And I think that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I agree. That's the reason, similar reason I took the McDonald's route was exactly for those reasons. Very transferable skills, and whatever would happen after that, I would definitely have some skills that could take me further than just any kind of job. I would have these critical management skills. That's often quite hard to get if you're not in a environment where you're allowed to be, put in charge of things in a very young age, which is also one of the things in hospitality gives you. Talk a bit about ISS, because when I mention people in Denmark, where I'm from, and where you are now as the global head of food, ISS is a company that most people would know about if they have a little bit of interest in business, at least because it's a global player on heights with Carlsberg and other great brands. But many times when you mention ISS or any other catering companies, even some of your competitors, people says, "No, I've never heard about that." But who is ISS and what do you actually do and how many customers? And
So as you point out, ISS is a leading Danish-based workplace experience and facility services organisation. We operate in 30 countries around the world. We employ over 360,000 people, and we provide a range of self-delivered facility services. So that could be food, cleaning, technical facilities management activities, as well as, softer security and or workplace experience services. So, our focus is really on improving the workplace satisfaction of our customers and making sure that when their employees come to the office, they have a great experience, because it's clean, but also because the food's great and everything just works in that office. So, that's what our real focus is. And I think, we as an organisation have spent a lot of time focusing on technology to make sure we can capture data and, really come up to speed with regards to, the digital, transformation of workplaces and make sure that that's sort of a key part of our feature, as well as you pointed out, sustainability, and we can talk a bit more about that later.
And Hamish, so if you take, you play different roles within these contract solutions within workplaces, or actually I saw here over the weekend, I actually saw you're in the airport in Gatwick doing those probably facility management cleaning team. But what role does food play? Because I think, food and workplace is sometimes a bit misunderstood, but it plays a huge, incredible role, I believe. And I can see that when I meet people from business and industry or anywhere else, healthcare now as well, like food is incredible important, a part of that experience you talk about.
It is, and food is obviously one of those key service lines that ISS is focused on. We serve over 1 million customers every day. So in workplaces, in, as you say, hospitals, in schools, in mining camps, and we do that across sort of 20 countries where we self-deliver food services. We tend to really focus on offices and industry and manufacturing type environments, and healthcare are our three major sort of areas of focus. But in addition to that, we have very large sort of services around education, around running mining camps, and we provide the full gamut of catering or food service type activities. So we run restaurants, we provide material and service around office tea and coffee services. We run coffee shops, barista bars. We provide meals to patients in hospitals. So we run a big patient feeding program. We run, mining camps in remote environments where, in addition to providing 3 meals a day for those workers, we also clean their rooms. We manage the airport for them, and make sure they have a great experience when they come on site in a remote way, and then when they leave site, a couple of weeks later. So, it's fairly diverse what we do, but really exciting part of the industry that people perhaps don't recognise. That goes on behind the scenes in many organisations.
Yeah, because if you just have a little bit of experience, I was sitting and listening to extremely huge, complex models, and also to execute, you really need to be on your logistics, your operation systems, and your management bit, because also there's different needs, I guess, from client to client. It's not the same model as roll out at every place you are.
No, I think the real benefit of partnering with ISS or another facility organisation is to really get the benefits of that scale. So really good, strong systems that you can take across the organisation. Great sort of management of data and information, so that if you're an organisation that has offices or food service operations across the globe, we can get some consistency around what the offer is and make sure we're reporting on similar KPIs and things like that.
And for people to understand, like, if you should say, give us some words on what is the vision for food in ISS, and what, how does that look in the future ahead?
Yeah, food in ISS is all about the workplace experience. It's all about making sure that the food service complements, somebody's experience when they're at the office, when they're working in a factory, or when they're having an experience in a healthcare organisation or school or somewhere like that. As the concept of working in offices and factories has changed post the pandemic, lots of organisations are really looking at how they use services, food being a key one, to really make sure it adds value to the worker when they come back to the office. It's an opportunity for workers to collaborate over lunch or an experience associated with food, making sure that those things that you don't get when you're sitting at home, you get in an office environment. So lots of organisations are using food and enhanced food services to make sure it supports their retention and recruitment activities for employees, but also adding to the productivity of those employees when they're actually on work on site is critical. And we help organisations with health and well-being sort of programs that are so sort of linked with great nutritious food.
And that really, if we was really been interesting, as I prepared for this and been talking with you prior to this, is like the focusing on food waste, a very big topic right now in hospitality. I think it's been there for some years, but like it's really become a reality for many, because there's probably a pressure from the end user, the consumer, we can call them as well, and there's also a pressure from your clients, I guess, but also there is a cost pressure now on food that really makes you, there's a very good business case in understanding how much food do we actually need, what is enough in a way to deliver the service we have. Can you talk a bit about your very ambitious targets of reducing your food waste with 50%, and you said you're serving 1 million clients a day, so that's quite a lot by 2027.
Yeah, food waste is obviously just one of the sort of the planks of our real vision to be leaders in sustainability around food, and that's something that we as an organisation is really passionate about. ISS has very strong net zero commitments, and food being one of our key service lines needs to make sure that we're supporting those ambitions to get to net zero by 2030 for scope 1 and 2, and then 2040 for scope 3. Food waste, you pointed out, it's always been there, and I think it was always there as a cost item, that we were always, if you're a food operator, you're looking at the cost of food and how much is actually in the bin, or how much are you wasting, and really linking that to cost. These days, cost is obviously still critical, particularly in a time of high inflation, but it's actually more to do with food waste and the environmental sort of challenges that throws up. Food waste, they say that, almost a third of food that's produced is wasted. And in a time when we have, famines and we have, challenges about feeding, people in parts of the world, the thought that we would be wasting a third of all food that's produced is an issue for us. The other thing is that, food is a major contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, and anything we can do to sort of reduce the emissions associated with food and food waste is certainly front and center for things that we want to do. I think we have been really successful in sort of reducing our food waste to date. We've just announced that a couple of weeks ago that we've managed to reduce our food waste from our 2019 baseline by 30%, which is, we're really pleased about. We've done that by embracing technology. We use, an AI-based technology from Winnow Solutions that, measures what the waste is. And I think we've developed a core competency at the moment in really understanding our waste profile. So we know, for example, that 60% of our waste comes from sort of three key areas of sort of plate waste, trimmings from production, and sort of our main meal usage and things like that. So when we get that information, we can take that and change behaviours of our staff, change behaviours of our customers by, changing, the portion size and or really understanding what aspects of the food on a plate customers are embracing and eating, or what parts of the plate they're not eating, which is really critical for us.
It'd be interesting just to dive a bit into that, because I guess like changing anything in the food and operation in my world is always behavioral change in principle you're working with, and you need to, people have been doing something up to a certain state and now they need to do something new to achieve that. So how you're working internally with people to get a bit of grips on that, because one thing you always are scared about when you run a food operation is to run out of stuff. We're going to be out of this, and therefore we prepare more than we actually need. And that's definitely be a classic example in all the business I've been, besides McDonald's, where it's a bit more easy to control in many point of view, because you can predict much better. And today it's, your order to produce in principle, but it's really, really hard to predict what's going to sell on the day.
Yeah, that's a really detailed question, Michael, and there's lots of answers to that. Our sort of focus is really understanding through data. So really looking at the data. So every one of our locations now collects food waste data on a daily basis, and we consolidate that up. We overlay what we learn from, the Winnow system as well. And then we can make sort of targeted assumptions and change programs to really get to, the issue of the problem at a particular location. So if it's plate waste at a location, we will work with a local team to say, we've got a potential issue with plate waste. What do we do with our customer set on site to sort of change that? Are we overproducing? Are we putting too much on the plate? It may be that we've got a problem with trimmings in a kitchen, and that's about educating our chefs and or team in the kitchen to make sure that they are focused on what they can use trimmings for, stocks and the other sort of ingredients across the spectrum of our menus. So that's a really important one. But a lot of what comes down to it, and this is where I think we're really evolving, is planning, and that's that. How much food do we actually need on a daily basis? And, where we're thinking at the moment and where we are sort of leading, activities in our organisation is to look at how do we sort of understand how many people we're going to get into one of our kitchens or one of our sort of restaurants on a daily basis. And that's a product of how many people are coming into that workplace on a daily basis, making sure that we can look ahead and sort of say, well, it's a wet, day in November. How many people do we think we're going to need? How much food do we need to order? And how much food do we need to produce to service what we think is the sort of the forecasted number of people? And that's, we're doing that with sort of sensor technology, and we're doing it with sort of programs to sort of look at what the conversion rate is, people in the office to eating and things like that. And not just, are they eating, but what they're going to eat and what they're going to choose. So, it's starting to capture data on all of that type of activity. So That's
It's very interesting how you talk about how you actually deploy the strategy by actually using data
yeah,
to confirm are we actually doing the right thing, is actually working, and also how you'll be using physical data actually to understand customer flows and so on, because I guess that will be the hardest to figure out how many is actually going to come into the 10,000 people office building that day.
yeah.
It's going to be half, and I can imagine it's almost impossible puzzle, even from my experience in restaurants, how hard it was to predict footfall in a restaurant.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier, should we be afraid of running out? I think we should be afraid of running out of food, but should we be afraid of running out of one particular menu item, and we can substitute, for the last half hour of lunch, something else that's equally as nutritious, equally as exciting, but we're utilising the food that we have rather than having to overproduce food, and I think that's really important. I think the other thing that we are really focused on is also just general waste, making sure we minimise, the use of single-use plastics, introduce sort of reusable programs so that we're not, wasting packaging and or, anything associated with our sort of footprint when it comes to food as well.
You mentioned that, food waste is one focus in sustainability. Do you want to share a couple of the other initiatives? I know you're doing some great things within different other things, but maybe it gives sense now to dive into what else you're doing actually for, reducing emission and sustainability around food.
Yeah, we've got sort of three key planks to our sustainability program. Food waste is certainly one of them. Making sure that we're generally reducing our greenhouse gas emissions through, the use of more plant forward and plant-based sort of menu items is another that's really important for us. We've got a sort of an ambitious target to reduce, the greenhouse gas emissions of our food operations by 25% by 2030. And to that effect, we've signed up to the Cool Food Pledge. And then finally, it is about our procurement behaviour and what are we buying? Is it sustainable seafood? Is it, products that use palm oil from sustainable sources? Is it, making sure that when we've got a coffee program, we're buying, the best, most sustainable coffee we can, and what can we do to then support the growers and people in that sort of, part of their supply chain to, through programs to make sure that we can give back something to local communities and things like that.
You mentioned Cool Food Pledge. I know what that is, but just for the audience out there, what exactly? It's an incredible organization. There's a lot of big companies on board here trying to do something around emissions and food, and especially bring more plant-based options to the table.
Yeah, the Cool Food Pledge is an initiative of the World Resources Institute, and it's run across the globe, and it's run across sort of hospitality entities. So it includes major hotel chains, quick service restaurant chains, caterers like ISS, where we collectively all are working towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions from food by 25% by 2030. So the WRI and the Cool Food Program have great insights into how do we nudge and change behaviour of customers by, where do you position food on counters? How do you name and label food, in restaurants and on menus to make sure that, you haven't got a stigma associated with, being vegan or vegetarian, and making sure that, plant-based food options is just, something that you would expect to see like you would a steak or a chicken dish or something like that. So, we've learned a lot from them, and, we really, embrace their sort of philosophy around this. In addition to that, they provide us with some great insight into what we're actually procuring and what the greenhouse gas emission profile is of our supply chain. And that's, once again, one of the major benefits of partnering with somebody like Cool Food. Yeah.
And it's very interesting you're talking about how do you actually get the end user, the customers, to choose plants first, and how do you make it available, and how do you make it enticing to people, because there is some stigmas around plant-based food, as you say, veganism or vegetarian. Is actually very important that we move the bell curve. It's not about the people that already made the choice to eat primarily plants. It's actually all the people that eat primarily meat based diet, which there's nothing, it's also about not making them feel that they're doing something wrong, but like how can you actually nudge them in the right direction? Could you give a couple of example of, or maybe just one example of what you are doing, from your learnings in cool food, actually to get end users to opt in for the plant first option when they stand there and have to choose their lunch?
So certainly, it's probably even before that. We've spent a lot of time and effort sort of implementing sort of a program to educate our own placemakers and teams about what plant food, and plant forward type diets are. So, we're launching, some global e-learning across our organisation to make sure we can bring our own teams with us and get them on board with, how do they construct menus around, plant-based and plant forward dishes to reduce the amount of, red meat and other, animal protein type activities. So that's sort of the first point. We've taken sort of learnings from the cool food piece with regards to their nudging behaviours, and it is a bit about not calling things vegan or vegetarian, but it's also about where do we place those items in a restaurant flow. So we would always try and put the plant-based options at the beginning of the sort of the flow, so that people can sort of have more of that on their plate, or look at it and go, that looks really really enticing. I'm going to have that instead of the meat or the chicken or something that's perhaps at the end of the flow. So fill up their plates early with the plant-based option is sort of one strategy. I think the other thing is that, making sure that we learn from other organisations as well about, the great range of products that you can use as plant-based alternatives, beans, pulses, and, legumes and all those types of things that lots of cultures just regularly use. But in the West, it seems to have been, a little bit forgotten, and that's something that we've once again, put a lot of focus on, moving forward.
Yeah, and I love pulses, that, and the audience out there know I love pulses as well. But what's really interesting is also some of the work, because I had Paul from Beans is How,
Yep.
or the UN. He works part of the UN, and they have this Beans is How campaign where actually want to double the amount of pulses eaten in the world. So, and it's a very ambitious plan they have, and he actually mentioned ISS as one of the leading companies that helps actually promoting this. And but then, can you talk a bit about what that's about? Because now you mentioned pulses and lentils yourself, because it gives good sense to talk about that, because that's when you mention pulses or beans to people, especially end users, they can become a bit scared because they have, either a weird relationship with it or had some bad eating experiences with pulses in their past.
Yeah. You're right. ISS is one of the founding members of the Beans is How coalition, and that's been driven out of our US-based Guggenheimer business, and that's where we're sort of doing a lot of work with Beans is How. We've also taken that initiative to other parts of the world, particularly the UK and some of the Nordic countries. For us, we put a lot of effort and time into planning menus, and doing so, it's the increased use of beans and pulses and legumes is really should be part of any of our menus moving forward. We've also done quite a bit of work with Unilever and also their Future 50 food sort of initiative. So we've now got recipe books that incorporate lots of use of Future 50 foods that are sort of foods that like beans and pulses are sustainable foods into the future. And learning from a wide variety of organisations, whether it's WRI, Unilever, Beans is How, really supports us, collectively. And I think we are, an organisation that's eager to learn about this. So we resource a team of people in our organisation to find out, what's going on and making sure we can bring that to our customers in the workplace, in a subtle but really exciting way to make sure that they're enjoying the food experience. The feedback from the Pulse Kitchen sort of pop-up that we did in London a few weeks ago has been outstanding. People really enjoyed that, and the more of that type of sampling of food, incorporating it into the daily activity is really really beneficial for us.
Yeah, we're glad to hear that in the Pulse Kitchen, because that's in our blood. We also want people to eat more pulses, but without the sacrifice of taste and pleasure, which is incredibly important, as you say, when you want to move people, that actually the plant first option in general doesn't become about sacrificing something, but it's still around the joy of eating a great meal that both, make me feel good and also does good things besides that in the supply chain or for the planet.
Yeah.
How do you see? There's lots of challenges in hospitality right now. If you could, remove one of those, how would you? Which one would you like to be seen solved? Many different people talked about different challenges compared to where the business is, but what is the one you really would love to see? If that could go away tomorrow, that would be great.
Look, there's lots of challenges you've pointed out. One of them is certainly labour shortages and attracting talent to work in kitchens and work in hospitality. And it's not unique to ISS. This is right across the board. And I think post-pandemic, we've seen a real challenge with attracting young people to the industry. So certainly making sure that we can solve that problem would be really important. I think the other one for us is certainly around sustainability in general and healthy eating that goes with that. So that's another really important and passionate part of my sort of reason to promote this is, anything we do with food sustainability is beneficial for the planet. And making sure if we could solve the world problems associated with greenhouse gas, that's a big tick for me. But also the health benefits of eating more plant-based sort of food or a balanced diet is also really important. For the last number of years, there's been lots of focus on health and well-being of people, and food plays a really important part of that. So for me, anything we can do around that is going to be important. And the final sort of thing I'd like to see sort of fixed is, the recognition that people that work in the hospitality industry are actually really professional people. They're not just service staff. There's lots of qualified people with degrees, with MBAs in this part of the industry. And I think because lots of people touch food every day, they think they're an expert on it. But actually managing large events, large-scale food service delivery, changing hearts and minds across, a global business or even in a restaurant is actually much more complex than just going and cooking dinner at home. And I think I'd really like to sort of see food and hospitality, the industry, really recognising that, the professionalism of the people that work here, because I think that would solve some of the staff shortage challenges, because people get recognised for their qualifications and get recognised for really doing a difficult job that is more complex than just buying some food and putting it in the microwave or something.
Yeah, and I think also that like this, really, I really like you brought that up, because there's a misunderstanding about it's a principle. If you build a career, get high up in the ranks, is actually all about behavioral change. And that's a really hot topic in the world. Lots of people want to go and do it in tech, but actually doing it through food, and actually the challenge of getting a logistic machine, food and people, something that's very, fluid, to work at the same time is a huge challenge. But actually, the change management skills that actually takes to acquire during time to be successful, it's huge. Because it's not just the person in front of you need to change. It's maybe somebody on the other side of the world, or somebody you're never ever going to speak to.
Exactly. And the big food operations around the world, they are really big logistics challenges. Moving food, preparing food, mobilizing thousands of people to run food at an event or something like that. This is a real skill, and people in the industry recognize that. I think it's perhaps others that sort of oh, you just work in food, they just sort of see it as the restaurant they go to. And I think it is much more sophisticated than that, and it's a real business of food that I think is the real excitement of the the service delivery model, as well as the excitement of just great food.
I think one question I also want to touch before we move on to the last bits of it, Hamish, is also like, it's a hugely complex operation. We already touched on that a couple of times. Can you give a couple of examples of, how do you actually have, maybe some changes you've done in a post-pandemic world where there's less hands and it's just more challenging? What is like some approaches you're taking that has been very different from what you've done before? Because actually, I think sometimes also people maybe have a misconception and misunderstand actually, how sophisticated your operation systems has to be to deliver food on time and so on. But actually, what have you been doing to adapt the business model to the future?
It's all about technology and digital transformation of an organization. And like many in our space, labor shortages, and always wanted to be able to serve people quickly. We've sort of implemented a lot of self-checkout type technology, whether that's like an Amazon Go type environment, or is it just using AI to scan plates and pay based on what the AI tells is on the plate. All of those types of initiatives are things that we are exploring on a daily basis in the organisation and deploying them. So that's certainly one sort of area that we want to do. The other one is really making sure that we do recognise that the people that work for us are also it's about retaining those people and retaining great talent. So, really understanding why people come to work and why they particularly come to ISS. So, we as an organisation place a lot of value on, the individual in our organisation, making sure that they feel, that they belong in our organisation, and making sure that they feel supported and, being flexible about working sort of arrangements where it allows, and making sure that we have, great initiatives, particularly for our culinary experts, like our international culinary competition that we've just had, which showcases the great talent we have, not just across our organisation, but we give them a platform outside of our organisation with clients, and also on social media and things like that. That makes a difference to people. If they can sort of see themselves competing with like-minded people in our business, they get flown from their country somewhere in another part of the world to Copenhagen. That's something that people really like.
Yeah, and it's been quite interesting because I've been following it a bit. I wasn't there, but I could definitely see that the people that participated in this, well, really, it's a bit like Master Chef's kind of thing. It's the same kind of probably the preparation it takes to be there and be probably with the top 1%, or maybe it's less on an ISS level globally. It must also sharpen your talents, but also it makes you feel that you're part of something I might not be able to get another place. I think it's a great example of actually doing something that's a bit different than just having a job in the kitchen.
Look, absolutely. The culinary competition that we run, starts in countries, and we have 14 country competitions, running at the beginning of the year, and they culminate in a sort of a team that wins that country, and then they get narrowed down through a sort of a process to the top 7 teams this year that came to Copenhagen to compete. Some of the individuals that have never been outside of their country, so to come to Copenhagen, spend
Wow.
a fairly intense day sort of preparing and then sort of participating in the competition, but then also being able to sort of experience the great food scene in Copenhagen, and then perhaps go on after that and spending a few days or a week in Europe traveling around is a great opportunity for them as well. So it's certainly something that we get a lot of interest in our organisation, at senior level, but also at country level, right across the board.
What has, talking about, if you go back to you, Hamish, you're a business leader in food, and what has like your most significant learning been in the past 2 years? Let's say, I often call it after we left the pandemic, which is really a big moment for food because it was a rough time and there's still challenges, as you said. But like, what has been like some of your most significant learnings in that period?
The key thing for me is patience. As a task-focused individual, for me, recognizing that, we don't have to make a decision on every single activity or item today. Sometimes the best decision is to sort of, what I would say, hold and sort of think about it, get some more data, and then make a decision. And And I refer back, the beginning of the pandemic. If we made a decision at the end of March, about the future of a business, it would be very different to the decision you would make at the end of July 2020. And likewise, the invasion of Ukraine last year, major impact on food costs and supply chains and logistics. Your decision-making, ability really needed you to take some time to collect facts and data so that you could make the right decision at a point in time. So that sort of patience is one that is pretty important to me. Yeah.
That's super interesting. A couple of others has been on the show recently. One of them talked about, understand what 20% that drives 80%, because in food, we in general learn just to really quickly solve problems and put out fires. So how do we actually get up in the helicopter and actually look at all the challenges and then find out what 20% of those challenges will solve 80% maybe, and some of them will solve others that we didn't even thought about. But actually, taking that time to understand your challenges better, and actually maybe it's actually a one-off, and it's actually not really, there's no pattern in this, there's no data that underpins that this is actually a problem. That's maybe more an emotional problem. So I really, really, really like that. It's very good advice. And I think it's in general, we've been in this period, everyone has been in this, where we've been firefighting. Actually, it takes a long time to come out of that, because you have been thrown in one corner to the next corner, as you said. Like July, you probably look different in your business, and then you can say December 2020, when the second lockdown happened here in the UK. I think a lot of people thought they would never survive and wouldn't have a business. They're still around today, but again, you need to be able to step back, and that's what the pandemic learned us, and the having patience. I love that. Any advice you would give to business leaders out there that's trying to build a business as a force for good, and if that in sustainability, making it better for the people or the planet? Any top advice you can give, Hamish, on your own journey trying to do this?
Many years ago, I was involved in a program in Melbourne called the Williamson Community Leadership Program. And that was a program that took business leaders, NGO leaders, government leaders, and put them together for a year, on a weekly basis for, either 1 hour or 2 hours or a full day each week for sort of the best part of a year. And what that really told me is that as a business leader, we look at, life, activities, our business, through a particular lens. The NGO sector and the non-government sort of charity sector look at it completely differently. So what may be a really, small amount of resources and or money for a business actually is, a full year's budget for a small NGO that is actually making a real difference at a local level or at a country level. So I think I would be urging, business leaders in hospitality to sort of, get involved with local smaller organisations, particularly non-government organisations, whether they're food banks, whether they're, people that, organisations that are helping sort of unemployed people get jobs and an entrance into the workforce. These are all things that are going to benefit us, whether it's, using, surplus food, whether it's attracting more talent to us. And really recognise that, how we look at the world for resources and budgets and things like that is very different to the small amount of money that can actually make a huge difference to another organisation. So that's certainly something that
that's a very good question. Very good question to think about. And actually, no matter size your business, you can do it different in some kind of way, because you're probably better resourced than many of these organizations that's trying hard out there. And talk about Beans is how I was on a coalition meeting they call. It was really interesting. These smaller organizations, but they didn't need much to do huge impacts in schools or communities or with farmers, and those amounts didn't sound scary. And I know that from chocolate, where we have Sean Askinoshi from Askinoshi Chocolate is going to come in a couple of weeks' time, where he talks about he does these origin journeys where he actually just goes out and build networks and help them out in their own local societies. That cost his time, and then it cost him to do some fundraising, and that's making normal strides in farming communities in Africa or South America. So it's a very, very good example. What is the one question, Hamish, you wished I asked you, and what would the question be, and what is the answer?
Great question, Michael. But I guess the question, it goes right back to sort of the beginning of our conversation. But, why should young people pursue a career in the business-to-business, food service, hospitality sector, contract catering sector?
Yeah.
And for me, it is such an exciting part of the hospitality industry. You get such great exposure to, as we've said, clients, customers, the P&L, the business of food, but you also get an insight into how the world operates. You will be having breakfast in, a cigarette, manufacturer or a chocolate manufacturer, in their staff restaurant, and talking to their management team about, what's going on. Mid-morning, you could be in a school, understanding how the school system works in a country. Lunch could be in a boardroom for a top, Fortune 500 bank, and talking to their CEO or C-suite about, retention strategies for staff. And the evening, you could be in a box or, out walking around an event, sort of seeing that, the huge logistics challenges of providing food to 100,000 people at a sporting game or at a big sort of social activity. So for me, it is such an exciting part of our industry that I think is often overlooked, and I would urge people to sort of consider it as a great alternative to the traditional, hotel or restaurant type, experience.
Well, that's a very good question. A very, very good promotion of an industry, as I said in the beginning, that has not always been in the best light, in a way. And actually, there's going to come a couple of other catering providers on talking about what they are trying to do as well, because they also talk about the similar challenges. There'll be more of this. If people want to reach out to you, Hamish, and said, "Oh, I want to know a bit more about that," or "I actually have this question for Hamish," where's the best place to reach out to you if they have questions?
Like many, Michael, I'm on LinkedIn, and sort of certainly happy to engage with other, hospitality professionals. I'm also involved in the Bacchus mentoring program at Oxford Brookes University in the UK. So any, budding students who might be listening in Oxford Brookes, more than happy to sort of engage with them either through LinkedIn or through the program directly.
Absolutely great. We will put the link to your profile in the show notes, Hamish, so people can find it there. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here on the show and share your learnings, your journey as well, and all your great advice. Send you and the team at ISS power and energy.
Thanks very much, Michael. It's been a great hour.